right. Well, our next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Mark in Markville, Mississippi.
Oh, for God's sake. Now, that has to be some kind of nom de plume or assumed name. You're a Mark from Markville. That's too convenient, fella. Especially when Charlie is from Starkville.
I don't know Mississippi as well as you do, so I can't really.
You're saying Markville is so far away from Starkville, it couldn't possibly be the same guy.
I'm saying I don't know the map of Mississippi. I don't know where these towns are.
Well, hold on one second. Wait a minute. Hold on one second. Hold on. Let me just get my Randy McNally out here.
Shouldn't that atlas be in the car?
I've got one in the car, but I don't want to go to the car every time I need to look up where something is. Now, let's just see here. Hold on. I'm just going to go to the index, and I'm going to determine how far Markville is from Starkville, Mississippi. Okay, Starkville, E9. All right. You play the game show music while I'm doing that.
Yeah, I don't have any game show music.
Yeah, Starkville is E9. So,
E9.
Oh, I was not aware that Starkville, wait a minute, all the way over. So Starkville is right near Columbus. Yes, it is, right near Columbus, Mississippi. Well, I never knew that.
That answers a question everyone's been asking.
Well, now let's see where Markville is.
Let's see.
Because Markville better be a long way away. There is no Markville, Mississippi.
What year is this atlas?
There's Marks and there's Marshall County.
What year?
What year?
Yeah, what year is this atlas?
Hold on, I'll tell you. 2006.
So it's out of date.
I haven't changed this one in the office in a while, I guess. Wait a minute, are you saying they built a whole town in the last 14 years?
I don't know if they built a whole town, but maybe some residents of other places got together, started their own community, and it's turned into Marksville, Mississippi. All right, well, here's...
I feel like we're in the middle of a fucking bad Karnak the Magnificent bit, McMahon. All right, give me that question.
This question's from Mark in Markville, Mississippi. What are your thoughts on Dusty Rhodes' daughter going after the WWE on Twitter, saying that WWE needs to cut her mother a check for using the Great American Bash name? And what do you think about the way intellectual property worked out in the 80s and 90s in wrestling versus today?
Well, I didn't hear about this.
I didn't hear about it either, but
okay.
I don't follow Dusty Rhodes' daughter on Twitter, so I wouldn't know.
Well, but she's a fine young lady. And they're right. You know, that's why Cody was putting out trademarks on as much stuff as he could that his dad came up with that they hadn't trademarked. What did he say? He was trying to get some of his dad's cattle back. And they're still using the Great American Bash. Everybody knows that was Dusty's. Having said that, you're right. The copyright on the 80s stuff in general and all wrestling stuff has always been suspect or in litigation or littered with holes and loopholes and errors or whatever. And then there has to be a thing or a consideration because Dusty was employed by Crockett. If they had modern employment contracts in those days, Crockett would have owned the stuff.
That's right.
And then he would have sold it to TBS, and TBS would have sold it to Vince, and Vince would own it anyway. So they can look at it from that standpoint, but it's like at the same time, all the great blues artists and or, especially back in the 60s, the budding rock and roll stars, when in the dawn of the time where there was big, big money in music, they all got fucked on their first contracts or a lot of their intellectual property or a lot of their songs or whatever. It happens.
But that's not this, though. You just laid out what it actually is. Dusty was an executive for Jim Crockett Promotions, came up with the concept for Jim Crockett Promotions. The intellectual property would have lied with Jim Crockett Promotions and then transferred over to Turner once that purchase happened, and then later on to the WWE once that purchase happened. WWE, I'm not one to not slam them wherever there's a point to slam them, but they've done nothing wrong here, I don't think.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly where you jumped in on me for the first time on the show today, in a place where I didn't need it, where I could have used it before. And you jumped in and you were so quick to tell me, Jim Cornette, to stop this. But I was saying there has been those instances, and so that's why that a lot of people are sympathetic to the need, the screwed artist, right? They always come off as the baby face. Siegel and Schuster didn't get paid for Superman, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why there's the natural inclination for all the fans, because they don't like the big businesses and evil promoters. They like the guys like the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. So they're going to be on their side. But in actuality, as you just pointed out, they didn't do anything wrong. But what should have been done in a lot of these cases is that some of the people that even have the rights to this stuff didn't trademark it or copyright it or whatever. I mean, I've heard tales from people who have gone back and researched it, that major promotions that were big in their day and, ran the territories for years and years never actually trademarked their own name or copyrighted anything, right? It was just it was start up a carnival or a circus or Wild West or the wrestling. So there's a lot of loophole. And there wasn't a lot of, there was no merchandise to speak of in those days. There was no video to speak of, rights and or home video in those days, until the latter half of the 80s when things started blowing up. So all the stuff beforehand, that's why they didn't save the tapes. But there was not a lot of paperwork done in the wrestling business since the dawn of time, for probably in some cases obvious reasons. So there you go. But in this case, if it had worked out that way, yes, the stuff would have the stuff that Vince has from TBS, which came from Crockett, would all be Vince's anyway.